Not again.
Get over here!
Horror games come in all shapes and sizes. Some are really good, right off the bat. Some take a little bit to get used to. And it grows on you. And then you realize after it's all said and done, it's a great time. And some just plain stink. Just plain stink. Not scary, the monsters are not imaginative, and the characters are poor. Yada yada yada. All the tropes that we don't like about a scary horror video game. Now, Callisto Protocol, on the other hand, which came out on December 2nd of 2022, is a bit of a mixed bag. It's a bit of a mixed reviews. It's a bit of, well, here and there. Now, Callisto Protocol was supposed to be the spiritual successor to Dead Space. Now that right there is probably why this game didn't do as well as it was supposed to, because a lot of pressure, well, with a statement like that, a lot of pressure is understandable when you're comparing yourself to Dead Space. Now, I understand that Glenn Schofield is a Call of Duty Dead Space veteran. He's one of the head honchos, you know, he helped make the original Dead Space, and we can all appreciate that in all its scary glory. Most of you would disagree with 2/3 of that statement because not many people like Dead Space 3, which I can understand, but for me, I thought it was a pretty dynamo trilogy, and, you know, it just didn't, Callisto Protocol, what happened? So, what we're going to be talking about here is Callisto Protocol and why it's a mixed bag. Now, this is what the critics are thinking. I'm waiting a little bit to play this game, okay? I'm going to wait till there's a steeper sale because I want to get it for the PS5, but I don't want to spend the $70, especially when I'm getting a mixed bag. The Steam players have spoken and the critics have spoken. But with that said, folks, let's start. The Callisto Protocol, the next game from Dead Space and Call of Duty veteran Glenn Schofield, and the debut offering from Striking Distance Studios, launches today, December 2nd. Reviews for the games are now online as well, painting a picture of what critics are saying about the long-awaited gruesome horror game. Now, you take every arbitrary review with a grain of salt, but you gotta also do your research. That's always important. You don't want to go in blindly. The Callisto Protocol is a spiritual successor of sorts to Dead Space. It is Striking Distance first game and was originally meant to be a game set in the PUBG universe, but later shifted away from that ambition. Interesting, right? It takes place on a prison colony on Jupiter's moon, Callisto. The moon is overrun with alien enemies, and Striking Distance has cooked up some gruesome death scenarios inspired by part of the real-life grisly car crashes. On PS5, the game uses the DualSense controller to make the player feel the crunching of bones. I think it was GameSpot or IGN saying that the death animations are too long and you cannot skip them. So, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to think about. Now, speaking of GameSpot, they are up to bat on their review, which they gave it a 5 out of 10. And they said, overall, individual elements of the Callisto Protocol are just at odds with one another too often. The enemy design and melee-focused combat mechanics lend themselves to these incredibly tense and fun close quarters brawls when you're only fighting against a couple of targets at a time, but the game regularly locks you into frantic mosh pits or frustratingly difficult boss fights instead. Now, a horror game, it's got to be claustrophobic. There's got to be things where you feel like you're up against the wall, there's nowhere to go, and you can't breathe, okay? That's the whole point. And a bunch of noise is happening, and spooky shit is coming at you, and what's the thing you can do? You got to push forward and fight. GameSpot reviews are, for me, a mixed bag, hit or miss. I don't like GameSpot too much because they're very, very, very critical on every game they play. I don't know what's going on over at GameSpot, if they're getting whipped to death. If they say something good about a game, then they get whipped even harder. I have no clue. But GameSpot has always been the not so nice. So they're like the extreme end of the spectrum. I would say IGN's probably could be on the other end, maybe not so much, because they complain about too much water in a Pokemon game. Anyway, Game Reactor, 9 out of 10, says the Callisto Protocol is a triumph. It's not only a triumph because it refuses to include some of the both predatory and bloated mechanics and systems, which almost seems ubiquitous in game design today. It's a triumph because it's an entertaining thrill ride, which reaches its goals thanks to understanding the balance between ambition and practical grasp. That's one way to say it. It's beautiful to look at, superbly acted, nicely put together, and above all, it's seeped in atmosphere and tense moments. Striking distance and crafting has made a damn good one. So that's a stark contrast from a 5 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10. Now, horror games are pretty hard to impress the audience. It's a very niche audience. Not everybody is into horror video games because 1, it's too scary, or 2, it's too scary, or 3, it's too scary. That's pretty much it. But if it's a game that's done well, it's done in an intelligent way where it's like, okay, I can actually enjoy this even though I'm not so much of a horror fan when it comes to movies or video games or whatever, right? Or books. But if it's got an art form to it, if it really immerses you in it, and when you put yourself in the shoes of what we see in this picture right here, then, why not, right? Why not give it a chance? If a horror game is fun, and it does have some horror elements or something that gets me kind of spooked or puts me in a good atmosphere, I could appreciate it. I hope I'm wording this right. I'm trying to sound not so dumb, but that's kind of hard for me. So, Skill Up says, I don't recommend. Very little in the way of story, characters, or horror. Oppressively linear, terrible combat that excels only in frustrating you, and absolutely woeful PC performance. It breaks my heart, but sadly, the Callisto Protocol is an easy skip. Now, this is a person that probably hyped themselves up beyond belief because guess what? You see the tagline of, a spiritual successor to Dead Space. And that's probably what the main thing is that it disappointed a lot of people. And that's just, I know, it's a crying shame. But I did hear complaints that story, characters, and horror was not so good. Dead Space, if we're going to, just to keep it in an easy comparison, Dead Space, is about Isaac, engineer crew going to the USG Ishimura. They don't know what's going on. They got some type of distress signal, and Isaac wants to see his girlfriend. Well, spoilers, turns out his girlfriend's dead, and then it haunts him for a very long time, or she haunts him for a very long time. And you find out that there's creatures and monsters and this whole marker business. It's a whole fucked up situation. But the characters are pretty memorable. They stand out in their own way, even though majority of them all die, and Isaac just goes through hell and back again and again and again and again. We still grow fond of these characters, and then, like I said, they're memorable. Story, in a horror movie, sometimes you just want to just play a popcorn type game or watch a popcorn horror movie. You don't really want to care about the story or characters, but if it happens to have all three, then that's great. But it's all about the horror and the kills and the way it's done, right? And just the atmosphere. So if a game can't even do that, then that's a problem. And then, on top of that, woeful PC performance is another problem, and that's a crying shame. Apparently this game runs the best on the PS5, from what I've gathered. It says so here. Alright, Dextro, 5 out of 5. Perfect review. Perfect. The constant fear and dread incited by the phenomenal visual and sound design are only complemented by the compelling story. So what a stark contrast. Very little, from Skill Up, very little in the way of story, and this says complemented by the compelling story. The Callisto Protocol is hopefully the start of an exciting new franchise. It is another sign that survival horror is anything but dead. So this is another stark contrast of what was up top, Game Reactor to GameSpot, saying I don't like the game, and then saying I like the game, and then Skill Up says I don't recommend, and then this says definitely I recommend. So, like I said, the mixed bag that is Callisto Protocol. This is a tough one, and I think everybody's opinion is going to be very, very different. It's just a shame that the PC has got the most fucked up version. I'm telling you, the PC versions, it's a crying shame. It is a crying shame. Now, IGN, on the other hand, is the mixed bag review. In the middle, I would say. Average, I should say. 7 out of 10. The Callisto Protocol is a satisfyingly gory spiritual successor to the Dead Space series, but it's ultimately more of a striking modern mimic than a scary new mutation. Now, I can understand this. If the game's not inventing any new ideas for its horror genre or anything, or whatever, right, that stands out above the rest, instead of just seeing it as a Dead Space maybe ripoff or Dead Space-like game, whatever, right? We want to see Callisto Protocol stand on its own 2 feet. There's nothing wrong with being inspired. There's nothing wrong with having something to look up to, especially when you have some people coming from the Dead Space team like Glenn Schofield. But I digress. here we are reading a review that it doesn't do anything. It's more of a modern mimic. Now, some of you might not care about that, and that's perfectly fine, right? I don't go into horror games looking for brand new experiences when it comes to, I mean, geez, I've been playing video games since I was a little kid, and nowadays modern gaming, what are they inventing that's new? It's really hard. It's really indie developers that are the ones that are really trying to reinvent the wheel in some shape or fashion, you know? But, you know, when you're a AAA title charging AAA price, you might, I mean, would you be too surprised if they don't go so far off, you know, trying to, you know, they don't try to really reinvent the wheel? I don't know. I let you guys decide that. My thing is, if the game's good, the game's good. If it's fun, it's fun, right? I could turn my brain off a little bit like that. I try not to go in so hard with constructive criticism or just criticism in general when it comes to playing video games. I just play it as is, and if I had a good time, I had a good time. If it had glaringly bad issues and it sucks balls and it stands out, yeah, that's going to be a problem. I can notice those things. Now, VGC, another mixed bag review, 3 out of 5. The Callisto Protocol delivers the violence, intensity, and horror that lives up to its Dead Space predecessor. So this is somebody who was satisfied with how it was done, comparing it to Dead Space, but with deeper strategic combat. Yeah. However, a cliche story and a lack of original ideas means that it has one tentacle stuck in the past. So maybe this game probably followed too closely to the sun with Dead Space. Maybe it's given the same premise and ideas because, hey, it worked in the past, so let's try it over here in a different kind of setting, formation, even though this game tries very hard to be Dead Space, but not be Dead Space. It's like I said, it's a mixed bag. So these are the reviews so far about the Callisto Protocol, from about a handful. Now, if you look at the Steam reviews, if you look at the reader reviews of Callisto Protocol, you might see some things you will like, you might see things you don't like. But all in all, you guys need to do the homework, you need to understand. And you know what, for those of you who took the plunge and bought it on the day of because, you know, you were excited, you know, this game did look promising, I will admit. Let me know what you think down in the comments below and if you like the game or not. Let everyone else know. Hey, let's make this an educational experience. Now, for those of you who that didn't buy the game, what were the reasons why you didn't buy it? What held you back from giving this a shot? Was it the fact that not too long from now there's a Dead Space remake on the horizon, followed by a Resident Evil 4 remake on the horizon? Maybe you wanted to play some definite games, some games that might give you the most bang for your buck because you know these companies don't fuck around with horror. Well, EA Dead Space remake, I'm not too sure. Resident Evil 4 remake, on the other hand, looks pretty good. All in all, Callisto Protocol review is a mixed bag. Nico is hesitant for him buying it because I don't want to pay AAA price for a mixed bag because it's $70 on the PS5. And 2, I don't know, seeing everything, performance reviews and stuff, not the best for Callisto Protocol. And then, you know, just kind of just want to wait now, you know. Also, I'm playing Dark Tide, Warhammer 40k Dark Tide, and Pokemon Scarlet Violet. Say what you will about Scarlet Violet's performance issues, it's still a really fun game. But anyway, folks, this has been the mixed bag that is Callisto Protocol. Hopefully you guys are having a good time with it. And if not, maybe you can get your money back just in time. Maybe just in time. Maybe you're one of those mixed review people on Steam that are really disappointed. But remember, if you're comparing it to the greats that came before, holding on such a high pedestal, I think in the end, you're always going to be disappointed. So hyping yourself up that hard might not be a great idea. And, you know, I also blame the marketing for the games that come out these days when they compare it to old franchises because it has one key member from these old franchises coming in to make a new franchise. But anyway, thanks again, folks. NikoTheLegend signing out. Take care, Pathfinders, and enjoy the maybe or definite or not so horror experience that is Callisto Protocol.
I just want to die.